Next up, the CarBuyer Advisor, your first place to turn for everything automotive.
The more informed, prepared, and educated you are when it comes to repairing and maintaining your vehicle, the more likely you are to make good choices about where to have the work done. This week, we'll be taking a closer look at one of the most important parts of your car, the braking system, the various components, how they work, and what you need to know before you have any brake work done. Consumers, because of their inherent concern for their personal safety, are all too often taken advantage of when it comes to this subject, and sold items they either do not need or sold them well in advance of the life expectancy of the current brake pads or parts. The other concerns are inferior parts that can be used by cut-rate shops that offer extremely low prices to entice you to do business with them. We spend a great deal of time advocating you demand the highest quality products at fair prices. The braking system on your vehicle is one that warrants your understanding and knowledge as a consumer and that you make informed decisions. Here today to talk with us about braking systems, please welcome Tom and Michelle O'Donnell, owners of Preferred Auto Care, and thank you so much for being here today.
Good morning.
Thanks, Mitch.
Now, some of our listeners may have had the chance to get to know you on one of our previous shows. If you missed Preferred Auto Care's interview, you can listen to it on our Facebook page at the CarBuyer Advisor. And a link for that is also available on our website, thecarbuyerinvestor.com. I'd like to start by reviewing some of the history of Preferred Auto Care. Please share with our listeners some background on your shop, how long you've been in business, and the makes that you specialize in.
We've been in business since May of 1990. We specialize in Honda, Acura, Toyota, Subaru, Lexus, and just mostly all Japanese cars.
And you mentioned since 1990, so we're talking again decades. I mean, and really, if you do the math, that's a lot of 24-hour periods put together back to back. It's a few, close to 10,000 of them. I think I did the math once recently. Now, Tom, we had spent a little time on this last visit talking about the value of having a shop that specializes in specific cars, perform your maintenance and repairs. Again, for the people that missed your last appearance, explain how that translates to the consumer.
Well, by working on the same cars all the time, it's a really great benefit because if a car comes in for a repair, you try to remember what happened because if by working on the same vehicles over and over and over again, you will see it again. More than likely, several times.
It becomes second nature. You almost it naturally know what to expect when you get to it.
You know what to expect, and then when you do have an issue, you know exactly where to start your diagnostics.
Well, and that's part of it. You're more likely to make that proper diagnostic the first time and not charge for something that doesn't need to be repaired. Now, Michelle, we were talking recently about our female audience and how many of them feel when they take their car into a shop for repairs. You mentioned both of your customers, both men and women, have shared these concerns with you, especially when it comes to the braking systems. Share some of that with us.
Yeah, I think a lot of times women feel maybe a little intimidated or they feel like they're going to get taken advantage of. And that's a total normal response because, they don't have the knowledge of, what they're stepping into. But I think, for me, myself, if you have like a bad feeling in the first, part of that feeling that you
Initial
get.
Gut level.
Yeah, the gut. I mean, I think mostly people should listen to that. If it doesn't feel right, then you shouldn't be there.
Well, and that's exactly what it boils down to. You probably get that sense right away when you start to get sold something, that whether it seems that you're just being sold something because maybe they think they can sell it to you or if you genuinely need it. But really, I think the best choice that our female listeners can make is to know where they can go, where they don't have to worry about that to begin with, where they can come through the door and get treated right regardless of gender. And I know right now there are many of our listeners really interested in this subject, and they want a shop that's honest, that doesn't inflate prices or attempt to sell additional unneeded services to anyone, regardless of gender. Now, I even heard of another shop that catered to a primarily female audience that when they closed their shop, referred their customers to you. You must have been honored by that.
Oh, extremely. It was a great honor.
And I have to say, I just witnessed, this is how this business operates. Well, I was talking to Tom a couple of weeks ago. I overheard a conversation, and he was talking to a customer that they were likely going to need brakes on the next oil change or two. There was still pad life left, and they would check them the next oil change. Depending on their driving, they may get more time out of the current pads. And that's why I asked them to come on the show and discuss this topic. You cannot believe the number of times in my tenure in this industry that I've seen shops that would have instantly sold that repair. Just mention brakes and it embarks fear in most people. I thought it was really interesting what you said to me, Tom, when I discussed this with you. If you don't recall, it's okay. It's something I may never forget. Do you recall what you said?
Oh, I don't recall exactly.
I'll give you a little insight here because I paid attention to this. It was really that profound to hear your response. It was, you said, I'll get the job done on the next surface. And basically what you were saying is that you knew they were going to come back to you, that they were treated fairly, they trusted you, and you weren't worried about getting the money today, that you knew that the economy was a little tight and that they could value from the extra benefit of the extra miles and that you'd get the repair. You didn't have to have it today. And this is something that when you have the type of background in the industry that I do, that it leaves a permanent impression in your brain. It's really impressive. It's really why we've asked you to be not only back on our show. It's that type of integrity that is prompted us to ask you to be a regular guest on our show. I think what I want to talk about here is I want our community to understand the role that in most service departments that a service writer plays. And this is where that stems from, that need to sell today. It's a total surprise to them when they find out that service advisors are usually typically nothing more than commissioned sales reps. And how does that differ in your facility?
Well, I have been there for over 20 years, and I have never had one commission salesperson or service writer. The reason being is when somebody's paycheck's based primarily on commissions, they're going to try to sell, whether they really need it or not, or they could take a minor thing and turn it into a huge thing. They can use scare tactics, and that's totally against everything I believe in.
Well, and who does the estimate repair, the estimates in your facility?
I do all the estimates. Normally, 99% of the time, I go out and look at the vehicle myself, see how needy it really is, and we'll go from there.
Well, I want our listeners to wrap their brain around that. So a business owner that's owned an automotive repair shop for 20 years writes his own estimates. You deal directly with the principal operator of a business. It is the level of concern for reputation that drives an individual to do that that really impresses me so much. And this is the truth. If you don't believe me, just stop by and see who greets you behind the counter and who's going to talk to you about what your car needs and when it's needed. Now, we promised we were going to talk about the various braking components, and please elaborate on that for us. What they are, how they work, and what you need to know before you have brake work done.
Well, biggest complaint about brakes would be noise or vibrations. And there's many components. There's ABS systems, there's master cylinder, there's modulator, accumulator. The list just goes on. Pads, shoes, wheel cylinders, calipers. And what you need to do is be aware of all the components to be properly diagnose the problem.
Well, you shared a story about that with me recently about a customer that came in. They had we'd gone through their original factory pads, and then they went to a shop in Reno and had their brake job done the first time before they came to you. And they were required by this business to replace the brake calipers in order for them to change the brake pads. Tell our listeners what they were told and the mileage they actually got out of these repairs with the new calipers.
Yeah, I remember that story. A gentleman came in, and he said it had a fluid leak on his left front wheel. So we went and checked it out, and it was his brake caliper leaking. Well, he also needed front brakes. And he said, well, he already had the calipers replaced. And the reason they were replaced is so he could get just as many miles out of the original pads. Well, he got originally got $35,000 on the first set, With new calipers and new aftermarket parts, he only got $25,000.
Well, and you just mentioned aftermarket parts. I mean, I began talking about quality and that some shops will use inferior parts to advertise low prices that are below the cost of a shop that refuses to sell inferior products and services. Share what they can expect if they choose you to do their brake repairs.
Well, we'll always use OEM parts.
And OEM, for the average listener, is original equipment manufacturer.
That's correct. Original equipment. And
then the other thing is that you won't sell them other items that they don't need. And the interesting thing is that you were discussing with me that calipers they're not always needed, and that you will inspect them to determine if they're needed. Yet this other shop chose to sell those as a mandatory requirement to doing their brake pad replacement.
Oh, yeah, that's a little out of line.
It is, and we hear that all the time. Again, this is why we want the consumer to be educated and informed, to know that they're not always required, and that it really takes a qualified shop that understands and knows that vehicle well enough to make that determination, and not just for the idea of selling you for the benefit of profits. Now, I didn't know this next one, and I've been in the industry for decades, but one of the models you work on, you were telling me about, and a technician inexperienced with Hondas may think the shoes need to be replaced, yet to an expert that specializes in Hondas, they were at 50% life expectancy. Please tell our listeners a little bit about that.
We'll see that a lot. Is somebody will come in and say, I need a price on my rear brakes. I say, well, let us look at them first. The reason being is, on most of the manufacturers, the brake shoes have a lot of surface area, and the brake shoe material is only a few millimeters thick. So if they come in and they have 2 millimeters left on their brake shoes, there's still 50% of the brake life left.
On some models, they're only 4 millimeters thick to begin with, and yet some of them are thicker, but that particular model, 2 millimeters on some cars would be, it's pretty close to being ready for replacement, but on that model, you still have half the brake life left.
That's correct.
And so many shops would sell you that job, I mean, again, because they're lacking knowledge sometimes, or just their intent on upping the cost of the repairs for profit. Tom, you also were discussing the vast majority of shops turn rotors on a brake lathe, and that's not how you choose to do it. Tell our listeners how you do it and what the advantages are to your approach.
We have a special piece of equipment, and it actually machines the rotors on the vehicle. The primary advantage of that is if you take a brake rotor off and you put it on a machine, well, you just trued that rotor to that machine. You did not true it to the vehicle. And normally what happens when you do that, the brakes feel fine for the first 3 months or so, but then the vibration starts to come back again.
And that's as the pads seed against the rotor, and again, as the pads then develop the trueness of or try to adjust to the trueness of the brake lathe, that they don't.
That's correct.
Well, I hope by now our listeners really get our concept here, the whole show concept, that it is about quality and knowing what quality looks like. And we recognize there's so many different categories in the automotive industry that we really can't expect unless you spend your lifetime like we have in the industry, if you'd have the ability to really know the best of every category. And we hope that you've had the opportunity to really get to know some quality businesses, what they look like today. Tom and Michelle O'Donnell, Preferred Auto Care, how do they reach you, and where are you located?
We are located at 1705 Gregg Street in Sparks, Nevada. Our phone number is 775 area code 355-7033.
And thank you again for being with us. It's a real privilege to bring businesses like yours to our community's attention. And please be sure to tell them you heard them on the CarBuyer Advisor. Let them know you're part of our community's support of quality business practices.
Where do you find trusted and accredited repairs for your Honda, Acura, Toyota, Lexus, or Subaru? Start with Preferred Auto Care, the specialists. People are talking about Preferred Auto Care, says Bronco on City Search.
Their work is of the highest quality, and I bet they stand behind their repairs. But I've never had the occasion to find out because I've never had a complaint.
ASE Master Certified and Better Business Bureau accredited A+. Most work completed in a day. Preferred Auto Care, 1705 Gregg Street in Sparks. Call 355-7033.